Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm doing this recording on April 18th. Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. If you subscribe to all my channels, I have YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. You can also follow me on X and GETTR, Substack, TikTok, Patreon. If you like the content that I create, please help support the work by sharing the links, asking your social media to follow me. And you can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Strait, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. And the ones that are helping support the news coverage that I do, you can be a paid member to my Substack or my Patreon channel. I greatly appreciate it. With that, what we're going to do is go over the news. This is the weekend, so this is kind of a weekend edition. Just to remind the audience that don't know, you can follow my live streams on Rumble, YouTube, and my website under Broadcast Live. I do that during the weekday, covering the breaking news and how it's changing the financial markets. Okay, with that, we are going to critique a video that Tucker did. He published this. I don't know when Tucker, well, let me rephrase this. Tucker did a video and National Review is critiquing it, and I'm replaying the National Review critique. I'm not sure when Tucker actually published his version of this, but the title of the National Review critique is "Why Does Tucker Carlson Think Donald Trump is the Antichrist?" So, just some light weekend commentary here. But before we do this, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products that I offer. I have ebooks, supplements, and course material on immunology and pulmonology. If you follow my advice and you get the supplements that I offer, you will slow down the aging process and get healthy. It's that simple. It's something that I have been doing for a very long time, going all the way back to when I was 16 years old, and I'm a lot older than 16 now. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver soaps. You can get it in lemongrass and also in peppermint. These soaps will help to neutralize, help to improve your pores of your skin, and it's made from structural nano silver. So it's very high quality soap. So use them every day. Get a few bars for your household, and make sure you use discount 5. I want you to save some money. All caps, discount 5. In addition, vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex is super important if you're 40 years of age or older. The first 4 B vitamins will help to improve your mitochondria. It's going to help to improve increasing the ATP concentrations, which is an energy source. It'll rev up your metabolism and protect your neurons through vitamin B12. Super important to take if you're 40 years of age or older. All right, with that, what we're going to do is play Tucker. So let's listen in here.
It's a leader who's mocking the gods of his ancestors, mocking the God of gods, and exalting himself above them. Could this be the Antichrist? Well, who knows? At least that's my conclusion. Who knows?
I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and that's quite the take, isn't it? A couple things to say about this before diving into it in more detail. One, Tucker's really going from 0 to 60 in terms of his Trump criticism, right? 0 being supporting him, think he's saving the country, to 60, he's the Antichrist. There's a lot of room between those two things, right? You could take a couple steps in a more critical direction and say he sometimes says imprudent things and does imprudent things, or I don't like his foreign policy, or even he's a bad president, or even that he's a criminal president, suppressing the rights of the American people and pursuing unjust wars. You could say all that and still not get to Antichrist. So why is Tucker all the way there? It's because Trump has crossed him on a big thing that he cares about, clearly almost more than anything, which is that Trump is allied and joined with Israel in a war against the Islamic Republic of Iran, and that's unforgivable. Now, Tucker complains about, understandably, some of the things that Trump has said recently. He's had this big flame war with the Pope. He posted and then deleted and meme of himself as Jesus Christ. These are bad. Shouldn't have done them. At least shouldn't criticize the Pope in the terms that he has at times. But are these really the worst things that Donald Trump has done? After the 2020 election, Trump engaged in a no-kidding effort to overturn a Democratic election. That was pretty bad, but Tucker, at least publicly, stood by him during that and has gone all the way to Trump is the worst figure potentially in the history of the planet if he's the Antichrist. I mean, this is serious stuff. This is a serious allegation. And again, it's because Trump is allied with Israel and fighting a war.
See, the problem with Tucker is that he is playing to his alt right-wing constituency. It's sad, actually. It really is. But the thing is it's not that Tucker really believes anything he says. He's just looking for clicks
against the Islamic Republic of Iran. So what evidence does Tucker muster here? Well, he goes to the Bible.
Chapter 11 from the book of Daniel predicts the coming of a king, and we're quoting now, a king who will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed. For what has been determined must take place. It's all ordained, in other words, preordained. He will show no regard for the gods of his ancestors, nor will he regard any god, but will exalt himself above them all. So to a lot of Christians, or people who know the Bible well and believe in it, these predictions in both the Old and the New Testament, and there are others, seem to fit what we were watching.
I'm reminded of how the John Birch Society used to accuse Dwight Eisenhower of being a crypto-communist, and the rejoinder of the conservative writer Russell Kirk was, Ike's not a communist. He's a golfer. Same thing here. Donald Trump's not the Antichrist. He's a real estate developer and a golfer. Now, obviously, he's not a conventionally religious man. He's not well-versed in the Bible and in Christianity, but he said all sorts of things over the years to bolster Christianity in his own way. Here he was during Holy Week.
On Good Friday, the Son of God was nailed to the cross, crucified, and he died. For all of us, it was a day of darkness, but it wasn't the end.
Now, certainly true over the last 10 days or so. Trump on Truth Social issued forth on Easter morning, which he shouldn't have done, with this threat to the Iranian regime that used the phrase, praise be to Allah, derisively. Shouldn't have done that, shouldn't have posted that, shouldn't have done it on Easter morning, but this was a way to try to gain leverage over the Iranian regime at a key juncture of the shooting war. Then we had Trump engage in this flame war with Pope Leo. Fine for a president to disagree with the Pope. He shouldn't do it in the terms he's very often used, and also posting this meme of himself as Jesus, which he claimed afterwards. He thought he was just a doctor. That's ridiculous, and he deleted it. Shouldn't have done any of that, right? All that is bad. But does it really outweigh everything he's done to promote Christianity, to state his belief in Christianity, to welcome Christians into his administration, into his White House, to protect their conscience rights? No, I don't think so. Tucker quotes another biblical verse in the course of making his case against Trump in these lurid terms. Instead of going to the clip of Tucker on this one, let's actually take a look at these Bible verses on the screen. These are famous verses from 2 Thessalonians. Concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, I'm going to foreshorten here a little bit. Don't become easily unsettled or alarmed by teaching allegedly from us asserting that the day of the Lord has already come. Don't let anyone deceive you in any way, for that day will not come until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the man doomed to destruction. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. Now that's Paul reassuring believers that Christ hasn't yet returned and painting this portrait, giving us this prophecy of what will happen before he returns. And we get this man of lawlessness, this man of terrible evil, this usurper of God who will inevitably be destroyed. So we really think that Paul was writing about Donald Trump, right? What has Trump done? He declared himself God? No, he posted a meme that he shouldn't have, and he deleted it. And he's criticized the Pope. By the way, it's okay to criticize the Pope. The Pope himself is not God. Tucker is a Protestant. Some of the greatest thinkers and theologians in the history of Protestantism have said much harsher things about the Pope than Donald Trump has during this controversy, right? They called the Pope the Antichrist. So this is just an absurd, over-the-top criticism of Donald Trump, and also represents kind of horseshoe stuff, because Tucker is coming at this from a right-wing point of view, or supposedly right-wing point of view. You have others who are saying exactly the same thing about Trump from the left. Here's a New Republic headline: Trump's quest for a Mar-a-Lago papacy.
I'm not like most college students. For me, I could lose my teachers and my entire degree program.
Here's a headline from The Nation: the real reason Trump hates Pope Leo, he wants to take his place. I don't think Donald Trump wants to be Pope. This is a role that would bore him. He's not interested in spiritual affairs. He's interested in action. Now, he might want to redesign or renovate St. Peter's Square, but otherwise, this is a role that would not interest him. What is he interested in? He likes wielding power. He likes wielding executive power. He likes wielding military power as he deems appropriate. And you think this is good or bad or somewhere in between. It's probably somewhere in between, but it doesn't make him the Antichrist. He's not the first U.S. president interested in wielding power, not the first secular leader around the world interested in wielding power. But Tucker is making this deeper spiritual case against, really vicious attack against Donald Trump, because it connects to a broader theme of his, which is that the United States government is allegedly anti-Christian.
And once again, it's the country with the most Christians, but it's not a Christian country. And in fact, if you take 3 steps back, it's a nation, or it's a government anyway, that has for a long time really acted in opposition, explicit opposition to the interests of Christians, not just in the United States, but around the world. Our foreign policy, for example, seems to target Christians. And this has happened consistently enough that it's probably not an accidental byproduct of the policy. It may be the point of the policy.
Now, what evidence does Tucker muster for this proposition? He cites Vietnam, Iraq, and what's been going on in the southern part of Lebanon here the last couple of weeks. Let's tick through those. Vietnam. It's true, as Tucker says after this clip, that we abandoned Catholics in Vietnam, which became a communist country. Well, the first part of the Vietnam War, we clearly tilted towards Catholics. We became more neutral when there were Buddhist protests and the leader we had supported, Diem, falls. But we didn't want to lose the Vietnam War. We didn't want to abandon anyone in Vietnam. But what happened? Well, you had isolationists like Tucker Carlson cutting our legs off in Vietnam and saying even at the end we couldn't even bomb in support of the South Vietnamese army.
That is such a good point. There's so many people that don't realize that it wasn't just the leftists during the 1960s trying to get out of Vietnam, but it was also the right, the isolationists. Now, it is true that the conservatives, which are right of center, or maybe right of center, were for the war in Vietnam. But it is a good point to make that there were isolationists on the Republican side for the Vietnam War.
Which might have been a sustainable policy and might have saved South Vietnam and saved a lot of Catholics from a lot of suffering. Then there's Iraq, which was a terrible tragedy. You had Christians cleared out of Baghdad at the outset of the war. Then you had Christians and other minorities suffering a terrible fate when ISIS takes over Nineveh later in the war. Now, this was not just targeted at Christians, Yazidis, lots of other folks, terrible suffering there. This is not anything that the United States deliberately caused or wanted to happen. It was an unfortunate byproduct of the war. Southern Lebanon, yes, we have Christian communities displaced there in this fighting between Israel and Hezbollah. That's certainly not Israel's deliberate policy either. If they wanted to bomb Christian communities, they could do it at any time. What they've done is responded to Hezbollah attacks in the course of the war against Iran. So if Tucker is concerned about these Christian communities in southern Lebanon, he could urge Hezbollah not to rocket Israel anymore. This terrorist group to lay down their arms. That would serve his purpose nicely, you would think, but no, he doesn't do that. It's all about blaming Israel. Now, you can make a very good case the United States government should have been more cognizant of the interest of Christian communities, vulnerable Christian communities around the world over the decades. But you know what? President actually has been paying more attention to this issue in a very productive way. Donald Trump, this is why in his first term we get an executive order, we get a national security strategy that put a real emphasis on the protecting the rights of vulnerable religious minorities around the world. That's Christians. In Nigeria, Trump has made a big deal of the abuse of Christian communities there. He actually bombed Nigeria in response to it. He designated Nigeria in response to this actions and kind of rhetoric we never would have had from Joe Biden or from Barack Obama. But why let evidence get in the way of your smear of Donald Trump? The deeper case Tucker is making here is that there's a new religion that Donald Trump is allegedly promoting.
That's why they broke. That's the thing that split their relationship and got the president attacking her and Thomas Massey and the Pope. So what does that tell you? It tells you what the religion is. The religion is Israelism. It's the support of Israel. That's why the president.
Once again, Tucker is playing to his base. That's an America First isolationist agenda. And, if you got a problem, you got to blame someone else. It's got to be someone else. It can't be yourself in the mirror. No, it has to be someone else. This is Tucker. This is, he's playing the whole Duck Dynasty blame game. And isolationism for the United States is not going to work. It's not going to work. We have to take the lead and maintain our hegemonic power. But here again, this is where Nietzsche stated that the slave morality is a major problem for society. And the slave morality is a major component, or the cause of the slave morality is a major component of Christianity because of this suicidal empathy that's taking place, this apologeticness, there was colonialism, heaven forbid, that you actually win in a war. So the problem comes in is that people aren't paying attention that if you have over empathy, if you're willing to let your enemy dictate the terms, then you are going to lose your society. And this is what Nietzsche was warning people about. He was saying, beware of the slave morality. And it's heavily in the Christian religion. Now, Christian religion wasn't always that way. It's just in a postmodern setting, in a postmodern philosophy, where anything, where there's relativism and equal perspectives and all this stuff, then you're going to have a society that's religious, that will have a tendency to be a pacifist. And by being a pacifist, your enemies will actually take advantage of you. And this is what Nietzsche was warning about, that the society will start to devolve because of not taking charge of the situation. Don't overuse empathy. Don't be too passive. That doesn't mean that you have to be 100% active. You can be judicious in your actions, but there's a tendency for a society, especially when going to war, to be, one side will have too much activity with not really thinking about strategy and tactics. And then you'll have another part of the society that is way too passive and not willing to fight, not willing to do the things that need to be done to protect the country. So Tucker really is this suicidal empathy. He falls in the category of suicidal empathy, especially in line with what Nietzsche was talking about with the slave morality of the Christian religion.
Is totally comfortable surrounding himself with evangelical preachers, every one of whom has one thing in common, whether they're word of faith preachers or charismatic preachers or not.
So there you have it. It's not a Christian country, but it's an Israelist country. Where does this even come from? Look, Donald Trump is a strong ally of Bibi Netanyahu, has been for a long time. We've known about this for a very long time. If it fundamentally offended you, never should have supported Donald Trump, and he launched this war in Iran. That represents a foreign policy disagreement, not a religious disagreement. There are no Israelist churches or Israelist synagogues or Israelist catechism. Donald Trump chose to do this under his own power. He's not controlled by Israel. He's clearly the senior partner in this relationship. As I'm recording this right now, a couple hours ago, Donald Trump, Truth Socialed.
Not just that. Not just that. The United States has been involved with Iran for a very long time because of oil. The same thing with the British. The British and the Americans were dependent on getting Iranian oil. And when the Iranians decided to have a republic, all right, the United States was worried, and Britain were worried that the oil would be nationalized. So we helped with a coup and propped up the Shah. And the Shah came in to try to align some of the Western interests. And eventually there was corruption that started to take place. And there was a crackdown on his people because they were revolting against his regime. And eventually it led to the fall of his monarchy. And the Ayatollah Khomeini ended up ascending to power. And then further conflicts started to arise. Now, this is all taking place in, Khomeini comes in during Carter's administration. So we're talking like 1978, 1979, I think it's 78. And we've been involved in this for a long time without really so much the Israeli component to it. Now, the Israeli component probably starts to become an issue during the Carter administration. But this whole Shah thing, this whole overthrow, CIA overthrow, this thing's happening in the 50s. So, we're talking Eisenhower and, and then, so this issue that we've had with Iran, yes, there is an Israeli component to it, especially in modern day, but this thing has been brewing because of oil. It's really about oil. And not really about Israel. It's really about the petrodollar. If Tucker wanted to be honest, our foreign policy is not because of Israel. Our foreign policy is because of the petrodollar.
How he's prohibiting Israel from attacking Lebanon again, which is not the way someone talks if they're the junior partner in an alliance. So this is Tucker going to a really profound conspiracy theory that the United States government is controlled by evil forces, and the leader of those evil forces is the current president of the United States. That is a disgraceful smear And hopefully when Tucker Carlson actually at some point returns to planet Earth, he'll have the honor and the good grace to actually apologize to Donald Trump for making this preposterous charge. Trump certainly deserves one. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.
Get the peppercorn BLT Whopper today.
All right, so that's National Review on Tucker. I don't think that Trump is the Antichrist. Another important feature of this Iran war is the Saudi component. There is especially through the conflicts in the 80s and in the 90s and post 9/11, the battle between Shia and Sunni, the battle between the Iranians and the Saudis. And so if you want to really think about the war in Iran, this may be more of an alignment for the United States. The alignment in the United States, more for Saudi Arabia than for Israel. Again, because of oil. Okay. Now, the Strait, for the ones that have been following the channel, the Strait was opened up yesterday and oil went down a lot. All right, a lot, and started trading in the low 80s. This morning, news has been published that's stating that Iran has closed the strait because the United States is continuing its naval blockade. All right. So now the question is, what will oil do? If the strait continues to be closed by Iran, then we most likely will see oil go up above $85 a barrel, maybe approach 90. The question is will there be discussions over the weekend to smooth out misunderstandings? And this may actually lead to the end of the truce in Lebanon and further conflict between Israel and Hezbollah will ensue. So let's play this video that's talking about the United States reasserting control over the Strait of Hormuz. I'm sorry, the Iranians are reporting of moving to reassert control of the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, now to Operation Epic Fury. President Trump suggesting attacks on Iran will resume if a deal with Tehran isn't reached by Wednesday.
Rebecca Castor joins us now from Washington, and she has the latest. Rebecca, good morning.
Rachel, good morning. Late last night, President Trump said he received, quote, pretty good news regarding Iran. He says negotiations are going very well and that he's going to know soon whether the Iranians will make a deal by his deadline. If not, U.S. forces are ready to respond.
If you don't have a deal by Wednesday with the ceasefire ends, will you extend the ceasefire? Or will you
I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe I won't extend it. But the blockade is going to remain. But maybe I won't extend it. So you have a blockade, and unfortunately, we'll have to start dropping bombs again.
The U.S. Navy's blockade on Iranian ports seems to be pressuring the regime to agree to President Trump's red lines. Since Monday, at least 21 ships have been forced to turn around, and Iran's economy is on the brink of collapse. So yesterday, the regime announced the strait is reopened. President Trump confirming on Truth Social the Strait of Hormuz is completely open and ready for business, but he's not ready to send the U.S. Navy home just yet.
Iran has just announced that the Strait of Hormuz is fully open and ready for business and full passage. But the naval blockade will remain in full force and effect as it pertains to Iran until such time as our transaction with Iran is 100% complete and fully signed.
Because of this, Iran's military is now trying to reassert control of the Strait until America allows full freedom of navigation for vessels traveling to and from Iran. So that's going to be something to watch today, especially since President Trump also told several reporters yesterday that Iran had agreed to everything, including suspending its nuclear program, turning over its enriched uranium, and ending its funding for Hamas and Hezbollah. Charlie, Rachel, and Griff, back to you.
All right,
Thank you,
Rebecca Kester, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca.
So there are some conflicting signals because we are seeing reports that ships may be turning around because the Iranians are sending messages suggesting to these ships that the Strait is not actually open. And if they are meddling with something that they have agreed to, as President Trump has been talking about, they had better be very careful in understanding who they're trying to play.
See, this is a problem with the Iranians. The Iranians, when it comes to negotiations, they always play these games. They're always playing these games. Israel's been complaining about this with the Iranians and trying to get peace. The Saudis have warned about this problem for decades. So there was a documentary that was done during, I believe, the Biden. No, not the Biden administration. It must have been during the Obama administration. Yeah, near the tail end of the Obama administration by PBS. There was a 2-part series about Iran and the history of Iran. It's a very good series. It's around 3+ hours long, and it really goes into the detail of when the Shah comes into power, the overthrow, what happened with the Ayatollah, the Iran hostage crisis, the Iraq war, and the Sunni Shia conflicts that were going on, the post 9/11 stuff that was happening, the insurgencies that were being funded by Iran and by the House of Saudi in Iraq. The failed policy after the Afghani war with the Soviets actually led to more terrorism in the Middle East, because the reality was that they had they used religion to fight the Soviets, but then when the United States and the Saudis pulled out of funding Afghanistan in the 80s, that kind of led to further metastasizing in the region because the country was failing. And then, we're talking about early 90s, other bases and infrastructure being bombed because of religious fervor. And what's interesting is that the Mujahideen, it was really tied with Sunni religion. So they just kind of, there's these groups of people within these countries that are fighting each other because of a different version of Islam. This Shia-Sunni conflict is a big part of this instability in the region. And I think that many people that are viewing this as, well, it's always the Israelis' fault, always the Israelis' fault. And there's a deeper component here. It's about oil. There's a lot of corruption. There's a desire for one version of Islam to be dominant over another version of Islam, the Sunni versus Shia. The concern that the Saudis have with Yemen, and the Saudis, their society isn't 100% Sunni. On the eastern side of the country, especially where a lot of the oil terminals are, there's a decent sized population of Shia. Well, they're more aligned with Iran. Same thing with Iraq. there are, Sunni factions and there are Shia factions in Iraq. So this is really Iran is really a battle. If you want to go to the root of this, it's going all the way to the killing of their leader back, I don't know, 700 AD or whatever it was, or 900 AD. And they are trying to supplant the Sunni version of Islam. So Iran this is a religious war actually against Muslims and other Muslims. This is not an Israeli conflict, really. If you want to really look at this from the long arc, it really has nothing to do with Israel. It has everything to do with Sunni and Shia conflict of who has the birthright of the teachings of Muhammad. Now, there's finer context when you look at modern day news, right? You have the funding of Iran with Hezbollah. Or, Iran's funding of Hezbollah is what I meant to say. And Israel has to fight that. And they're doing that to actually get back at the United States, because the United States has been involved with the whole petrodollar, and we're aligned with the Saudis. But there was conflict between Bush Jr. during the Iraq war. The Saudis didn't want us to go in. And there was this battle between, Shia and Sunni. And then ISIS starts to come on, and Al Qaeda and all this stuff is. So there's you got Hezbollah and you got Hamas, you have the IRGC, you have the Houthis, right? But then you also have on the other side ISIS and Al Qaeda and other factions that are kind of like doing turf wars. So the whole region is really in religious conflict. And it's not because of the Israelis. It's really because of the fight between Shia and Sunni. And this has been going on for 1,200 years or more. So I think we have to have that kind of larger context in this region, that this is really, yes, the United States are involved, and it's about oil, and it's about the movement of tankers around the Strait. Yes, there's nuclear weapons involved now, and there's this, this country called Israel that's also tied into this whole thing. But I think if you zoom out and you look at this conflict in the Middle East goes back way before modern day Israel, the state of Israel, way before, way before.
And President Trump says that he had gotten calls from members of NATO, and he said, "I'm sorry, this is a little too late, a little too little, too late." Listen to this.
And now that the Hormuz Strait situation is almost over, I received a call from NATO asking if we would like some help. Thank you very much, NATO. And I told them I would have liked your help 2 months ago, but now I really don't want your help anymore. Because they were absolutely useless when we needed them. But actually, we never needed them. They needed us. They need us. They need us so badly. You know, it's a little bit like if you're a politician. It's hard to believe I'm a politician, but after I won, people came up to me, sir, I'd like to make a major contribution to your campaign. And I said, listen, just so you understand, campaign contributions after I won don't count. Okay, they don't.
That is the best.
So amazing.
It's so true. There are also a lot of people that came in at the 11th hour when they could tell that he was going to win.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he understands that for sure. Listen, we're seeing a massive, really consequential realignment. And I think it's about NATO. NATO's part of that. You know, what's the future of NATO? I mean, I think before this war, a lot of people thought no matter what, you know, even if Trump got behind them and said, give us more money, you owe us more money, you got to pay more money, there was still sort of this understanding that we need NATO. But after this, I think it's not just President Trump. A lot of people saying, do we need NATO?
And certainly President Trump, if President Trump manages to pull off what he is trying to pull off with Iran over the month or two, the United States will benefit from this, but the greatest beneficiaries, far and away, will be Europe and places like China and Japan and Korea. And so if he pulls this off, he will have work that NATO failed to do and that NATO will enormously from. And it is kind of interesting that they didn't lift a finger to help when, of course, we're always hearing about how when one of those countries get into trouble, it is a guaranteed expectation that American taxpayers are going to step into the breach and help them.
Well, and Ukraine was a perfect example of that. I mean, Ukraine was not in. A lot of people wanted them to be in. And sadly, the Biden administration signaled to them they could come into NATO. This situation happened in NATO, and it happened with Russia. And clearly, Europe felt threatened by that. And we ended up spending an inordinate amount of money. We still are spending money on that. And so, yeah, that was a war I really wish we hadn't gotten involved in, and it was on their behalf. So what is the future if NATO becomes sort of insignificant or goes away?
Well, just to your point, remember, President Trump's been calling NATO a paper tiger.
Right.
And those words are fairly hitting home because they really haven't done anything since the 90s. In Bosnia, in Kosovo. And ultimately, the premise of NATO, as people understand it, is this Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all. And they did not show up. They've been coasting for decades, riding on the comfort that if things come, a bad direction towards NATO, then the U.S. will handle it and we don't have to pay in. And I think the future, to answer your question, is the fact that the president has such a good relationship with the Secretary General Rutte of NATO, maybe there's hope to reform it. Okay. But I do think that the future, without a serious restructuring of NATO and recommitment of NATO, I don't know really what future that has.
Yeah, that's certainly their greatest hope.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube.
All right. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin C and magnesium. Vitamin C and magnesium will help with your immune system, help with your brain function, and help with your skin. You should be taking it every day. Super important. Resveratrol. Resveratrol will help to soak up free radicals, help to improve your mitochondria. You'll have more ATP. Resveratrol helps with youthful gene expression, and it has the ability to help get rid of cells that are in senescence. So you are able to get rid of cells that have accumulated toxins, have accumulated garbage. That garbage is basically lipofuscin. That's bad for your tissues, so you need to get rid of it. So taking resveratrol is super important. Resveratrol also helps with your skin. It stacks well with C60. Now let's talk about C60 for a moment here. C60, you can get it in MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, and extra virgin olive oil. You can get a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration on my store. Take a teaspoon a day every day. What this will do is soak up free radicals. It's about 1,000 times stronger more potent than vitamin C. One molecule of C60 is about 1,000 times more potent than vitamin C. All right. Now, you take a teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach. That's for proper absorption. And what will happen is that you'll be soaking up free radicals at the cellular level. Your mitochondria will improve, and you'll have more ATP. You'll have more energy. There's going to be less stress in the cells and the tissues, and you're going to have less inflammation. So the cells and the tissues and your organ systems will perform better. Your endocrine system and your immune system will perform better. Your glands will perform better. Your thyroid will perform better. In addition, by soaking up free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. And at the neuron level, your brain function will improve because your neurons will be healthy. You'll have less stress in the neuron, less inflammation at the neuron level. You're going to be soaking up free radicals. The mitochondria within the neuron will be healthier. You'll have more ATP, more neurotransmitters, and so you'll have an increased positive neuroplasticity. You'll be thinking better. You'll have better memory. So take the C60 every day, teaspoon a day is what you need to do. I've been doing this protocol for over 10 years. Now, for people that have problems with their joints, get the collagen. Collagen is perfect for someone that has a sports injury or has arthritis. Now, how collagen works is that it helps to remodel the cartilage and the cushioning of the joint. In addition, it helps to block enzymes that will erode the joint, and it'll also help block enzymes that cause inflammation and pain. So what this will do is this help to reduce pain, reduce inflammation, remodel the joint, remodel the cushioning of that joint, and you're going to be able over time to heal that issue, either arthritis or sports injury. The earlier, the better that you take it. Once you start having a problem with your joints, the better off you are. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the collagen. You can stack it with the collagen for max benefit. And let's talk about the collagen. The collagen is the month supply. This has a very high quality amino acid profile shown on the screen here. Take it every day. You can mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie. Some people put it into coffee or just milk. I put it in soft foods like hummus, but you can also put it in yogurt. But take it every day, and this will have you'll have the ingredients to help improve your skin, your hair, your nails, your musculature, your bone density, and your joints. And like I said, you can stack this with the collagen to help with improving your joint health. So please go to my store, get the collagen and the collagen. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products that I offer. I want to play this is from Bloomberg. Strait of Hormuz shut amid reports of gunfire.
Very simple indications are that preparations clearly are underway here. The streets are being beautified, as they say. Some events have been called off here in Islamabad, and there has just been a lot of speculation over the last week whether a second round of talks might be possible. Certainly the authorities here, and that includes the political authorities, are very much preparing for a second round of talks. The speculation, of course, is when exactly this might happen, when delegations might arrive. We have no confirmation whatsoever on that. Now, as you can see, appears to be a serious problem with the Strait of Hormuz being blocked again by Iran, that gives you an indication that on the ground, things can't be going toward a second round of negotiations. But at the same time, these are two sides that can get together and negotiate. The two things can be possible. There can be fresh hostilities, for example. There can be further tensions between the US and Iran, for example, in the Strait of Hormuz. And at the same time, the two negotiating teams are getting ready to travel here to the Pakistani capital of Islamabad for a second round of talks. It did look like everything was falling into place rather perfectly yesterday with the announcement from both the Iranian foreign minister and President Trump that the Strait of Hormuz would be fully reopened again. There was a 10-day ceasefire that was holding between Israel and Hezbollah. The simple fact that the ceasefire right now between the United States and Israel on one side and Iran holding and could very well be extended further still. But then you have further doubts creep in. But at the end of the day, the reality here on the ground is certainly the government here, the authorities are excited about potentially hosting a second round of talks. Underway.
Let's go to Jeff Mason. Jeff, are you excited about a potential round of talks? And who do you think you heard Philip talk about Pakistan is getting ready? Who from the White House team is getting ready? Are we expecting the same players from last time to go? And at this point, what are the odds of these talks actually happening?
Well, a lot to unpack there. And number one, what are the odds? The odds seem high because that's giving. It's a messaging that President Trump has been giving, that he is ready to end this war and he's ready for an extension of peace and not just an extension, but something more permanent. That said, I think with the news this morning about the Strait of Hormuz and also the clips that you played from what President Trump said on Air Force One last night, it's important to underscore again the mixed messages that the president and the White House have been sending about this since day one of the war. And that is exemplified in the fact that many of the things that the president said have been agreed or are done simply are not, or have not at least been confirmed by Iran. And they being Tehran in this case, are showing that or manifesting that in the Strait of Hormuz. Again, after yesterday, really goosing markets and exciting the rest of the world by saying that the Strait of Hormuz was open. Now it's not. Again, we'll see if President Trump comments on that today in the Oval Office. I think it casts, in general, to your question, Christina, a broad cloud of doubt over when and whether these talks will happen again, and whether they're nearly as far along in moving towards peace as the president has suggested.
As we have been from the very beginning of this conflict, we've been looking at two fronts, of course, the front in Iran and the front in Lebanon as well. And the president remarked on Lebanon yesterday at this Turning Point conference in Arizona. He did this swing through the American West and gave a couple of speeches. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about the role that Lebanon has played in this ceasefire negotiation.
Our deal with Iran is not in any way tied to Lebanon, but we will make Lebanon great again. I mean, it's about time we've sort of, the world has forgotten them, and they're good people who have lived like hell for a long period of time. And hopefully the situation with Hezbollah will get straightened out quickly.
Dan Williams, I won't ask you what it means to make Lebanon great again, but I'm curious if you could just talk a bit about the role that Lebanon played here in getting us to the position we were in yesterday when we had the Iranian foreign minister announcing this ceasefire deal on X yesterday morning.
It depends who you believe. You heard the US president say just there that these were unrelated, these deals. It's no secret, however, that the Iranians very much wanted to see an end to Israeli attacks on Hezbollah, on Lebanon. Keep in mind that Hezbollah is Iran's biggest guerrilla ally, biggest proxy. Presumably the Iranians want to see Hezbollah preserved almost as much as they want to see their own regime preserved in Iran. So that was agreed. It was agreed apparently with some high-handedness by the US president, because there's a credible report here that on the night when it was agreed, as the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was assembling a telephone vote by his security cabinet ministers, the news reported that Trump had already announced that the ceasefire was in place. Israel had agreed and it would begin at midnight. And there was some jostling and joking, I imagine mordant jokes among those ministers as to whether there was any point on them voting if it already had been announced widely, publicly, internationally. Add to that also that Trump, in that flurry of posts on Truth Social just a couple days ago, spoke very high-handedly about having effectively ordered Israel to cease fire in Lebanon. Enough is enough, he said. That optically isn't great for Israel's assertion of sovereignty in this war, of being an equal partner. It may also cost Netanyahu in the ballot box in a few months when Israel holds an election, given that many residents of northern Israel that have spent the last month in shelters, seeing their economy, their social fabric ruined by Hezbollah rockets, feel that they were shortchanged by the ceasefire, even though it's only a 10-day ceasefire, feel essentially that Hezbollah has been left standing and threatening them in the future.
Meet your new favorite email design platform. Create stunning emails without touching a single line.
Phil, I want to go back to you now. I'm going to read, there's something crossing the Associated Press right now with Dateline out of Cairo saying the British military is saying just a little while ago, 2 gunboats from the IRGC opened fire on a tanker transiting the Strait of Hormuz after Iran said it had reimposed restrictions, as we report this morning, in the area. The UK is saying the tanker and crew are reported safe. They have not identified the vessel or its destination. I want to ask you, because last time we talked to you, or one of the many times we talked to you, you were at the Strait. I know you've done a lot of reporting around there. Were any of those 20,000 sailors or merchant marines able to get out in this intervening time where it was unclear if the Strait was operational? And even though we had that brief period of time where Iran said traffic was open, did anyone take the risk? It didn't seem like, we watch these maps all the time, that really anybody was willing to gamble with their personnel or their equipment. And is that going to be the status quo for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, really strange situation, this one, this short moment of freedom, if you will, freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, that some tankers did decide to at least try out. Satellite imagery does show, and the tracking data shows that quite a lot of those ships, that includes tankers, of course, try to get out of the Persian Gulf, where they have been stuck for a very long time, some 6-7 weeks or more, but then turned around again, maybe the moment where they noticed that the big announcement of an end of the Strait of Hormuz blockade, both by Iran and the United States, wasn't really what it sounded like, both from the president and from the Iranian foreign minister. We have no confirmation of any ships managing to make it through. But as you mentioned there, that is a first incident in the Strait of Hormuz with actual gunships from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards firing at a tanker. It's the first time we hear of that in a long time. I think it's going to be at least 3 or 4 weeks because there had been these threats and indeed attacks at the start of the US-Israeli war on Iran. Plenty of it.
This sort of conflict that we're starting to get over the weekend probably will bring up oil prices closer to $90 for WTI futures, unless there's some sort of breakthrough for ceasefire over the weekend, which I doubt is going to happen. So that would mean that probably equities will sell off again. Equities were trading above 7,100, I believe. The close was on Friday. Let's take a look. The S&P 500 close on Friday was 7,126. So we have a 7,000 level for a support level. The next resistance level, if equities were to go up, would be 7,200. And if the 7,000 breaks, the support level would be 6,600. So just my observation of what's happening over the weekend with the gunboat firing at a tanker, the Iranians saying that they've closed the strait and not allowing ships to come through because the United States still has a blockade on Iranian ships. Most likely, oil will probably be trading higher and equities lower on Monday. Now, I don't think that oil will break $90 a barrel, and I don't think that the equity market is going to break 7,000 on Monday. But if we continue to have further conflict throughout the week, then you're talking about oil breaking 90 and the equity market breaking 7,000 and trading lower.
I believe it was just under a dozen of ships that were attacked by Iranian gunships and other Iranian forces. And those threats remained throughout this war. And it was those threats that led to tankers and, of course, the shipping companies and insurance companies whose rates were skyrocketing, who decided that it was just not going to be safe enough to attempt a passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Now we are back to exactly that, to an actual attack by the IRGC on a tanker, according to the UK military. Now, that is a serious escalation and a return to the situation we were in about 5 weeks ago. Just one attack like this one is going to put the fear in a lot of shipping companies, transport companies, in the sailors themselves to not attempt another passage through the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah.
Jeff Mason, I'll turn to you lastly, and I'm curious sort of what the White House has been saying about the back and forth that's been happening, not directly between Iranian officials and President Trump. The president has been indicating that Iran is prepared to give a host of concessions, including moving that nuclear dust, as it was put during that gaggle on Air Force One, letting the U.S. come in and, with Iran's cooperation, presumably move it out. No real confirmation of that from the Iranian side. How do they explain that level of disconnect? And do you see that as potentially just sort of laying the parameters for perhaps the second round of negotiations?
Well, there isn't an explanation for that disconnect, and I think that's largely the problem. And markets are listening to what President Trump says when he's giving a positive spin or putting a positive spin on the state of play, and that's pleasing everyone because it's clear that President Trump has moved in the direction of wanting to end this war. And I wrote a story about that yesterday. He's got domestic issues that he'd like to focus on. That's manifested in the trip that he made this week, talking more about the economy, talking about politics, talking a little bit less about Iran. But the reality is that the deal that he's talking about has not been hammered out. And a lot of the details that he's wanting to trumpet, including about nuclear dust, clearly have not been agreed to by Iran. So that is a large weakness hanging over, or at least a large question mark hanging over the prospect of peace that the White House has not offered an explanation for.
Okay. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I offer to help support the work that I do. You can get the ashwagandha root that will help to control your cortisol levels and help control your blood glucose levels. Turmeric. Turmeric will help to soak up free radicals and bring down inflammation. And lignans soaks up free radicals and brings down inflammation, helps with the immune system and your endocrine system. When you stack these three together, you get some serious synergy. All right. The turmeric, the ashwagandha, the lignans, take them every day. And what you're going to notice is that your immune system improves, your endocrine system improves, you're bringing down inflammation, soaking up free radicals, you're helping your cardiovascular health, you're reducing plaque formation. And because you're soaking up free radicals and bringing down inflammation and getting better blood flow to your brain function will improve. So please go to my store. To help slow down the aging process, take the turmeric, the ashwagandha root, and the lignans together. It's a very powerful stack. Now, another great supplement that I have to help with brain function and immune system is magnesium and zinc. So please go to my store, get the magnesium and zinc. Magnesium and zinc also helps the efficacy of vitamin D3. Clarity Factor, another very powerful neurostack that will help you to get rid of that brain fog, allow you to concentrate. It'll also help to improve your memory and your cognition. Over time, by taking this every day, drinking filtered water, what you're going to be doing is improving your neural connections, and therefore your cognition will improve and your memory. Super important. By taking these supplements that will help with your brain function, you're slowing down the aging process for your brain. And that way you'll have better function in your geriatric years. Super important. And lastly, omega-3. Omega-3 brings down inflammation and allows you to control your lipid profile. By controlling your lipid profile, you're lowering LDL levels and increasing your HDL levels. With less oxidized LDL in your bloodstream, the better you are, because you're reducing the chances of plaque formation. So you're going to get better blood flow. And when you have better blood flow, you have better perfusion, your organ systems perform better. Okay, with that, let's continue. I want to play this news that keeps on popping up about the FBI is looking into these scientists that are missing. No one knows why they're missing. I think there are 11 of them, but let's listen into this.
There are these 10 missing scientists with access to classified stuff, nuclear material, aerospace. They've all gone missing or turned up dead in the last couple months. Based on what you've been briefed, what do you think is happening here? And do you think that this is connected or totally random?
Well, I hope it's random, but we're going to know in the next week and a half. I just left the meeting on that subject. So pretty serious stuff, but we're going to be now. Hopefully, I don't know, coincidence, if you want it, whatever you want to call it. But some of them were very important people, and we're going to look at it over the next.
So take a look. The White House now probing the disappearances of the people behind me, the deaths of 10 scientists at least. Let's break down some of the cases. For example, let's look at at the age of 59 years old. And David Michael Hicks, a longtime JPL scientist involved in asteroid and comet research, no public cause of death given. And then you have a situation like Monica Reza. Monica Reza vanished while hiking under weird circumstances. And then you have William Neil McCaslin. This guy disappeared in February, deep ties to the Air Force research programs. So everyone has a bit of a mystery to their passing. And people are wondering, with the very similar backgrounds, extremely bright people, extremely successful people, extremely valuable people, is this all related? As you heard, the president can't say yes or no publicly yet, but the mystery remains. Let's bring in House Oversight Committee member, Missouri Congressman Eric Burleson, who is calling for the FBI to get involved. Congressman, when did you first find out about this?
My office found out about it last year. We sent a letter to the FBI about a gentleman named Matthew Sullivan, who actually we had reached out to. He was scheduled to come in for an interview. Within 2 weeks, he had suspiciously committed suicide. That report was referred to the Office of Inspector General. They deemed it credible and urgent. They then referred it to the FBI. So this is not the first that we've heard of this. That was the first that we became aware of.
The president was briefed extensively yesterday, and he's worried about it. You know, we hear about all this. We also know we're in a big time race with China for all this, too. And then people wonder about the undisclosed UFO program that more and more people are pushing to get answers on. Is there a relation to any of that from which you could share with us?
There certainly is. So General McCaslin, for example, is someone that we had reached out to twice to try to get some answers from. He is someone who has a critical role in working for the Air Force, particularly when it came to research. He was the one that oversaw a lot of this advanced research. He was someone that was very difficult to get a hold of, but we reached out to him twice, and then he just mysteriously disappeared.
You know what's wondering? If one person disappears, we see press conferences and we see people and mysterious deaths. We would see family members. Why haven't we heard more from family members and associates about their concern?
Yeah, I don't know, Brian. I wish we would. But look, what's really disturbing when you look back and reflect on it, you've got Monica Reza, you've got Anthony Chavez, you got Melissa Cassius, and you have Stephen Garcia, all of which, along with General McCaslin, walked out of their homes, or in the case of Mrs. Reza, she disappeared on a hike without their phones. They just literally disappeared, left all of their devices at home. This is not normal. These are some of the most advanced scientists, researchers in our nation, some of the most important people for a nation's national security efforts, and they all just mysteriously disappeared.
So, I mean, this does have all the hallmarks of some type of international or foreign effort, because we're in competition on nuclear. We're in competition on advanced weaponry. We're in competition on getting to the moon. And who you are in competition with? China, Russia, Iran. So that brings, if there's anything worthy of a all hands on deck investigation, this seems to be it.
This is a rattling call to pay attention to this issue and make sure that our nation's top scientists are safe and secure. This is too coincidental. And so we have to be investigating this. We We need to have our nation's top investigators, the FBI, and every agency looking into this matter.
8 have been found missing or dead since 2025. So this is only going to grow. In fact, I know one of the scientists that came out and said they thought that they were being threatened and stalked.
Yeah, we've heard that from multiple cases where they've all felt some form of threat.
And lastly, is this something Democrats and Republicans can get behind together?
Absolutely, Brian. My office is leading a joint effort with Democrats. This is a bipartisan issue where we're leading a letter to the FBI to make sure that they address this issue and properly investigate this.
Yeah, I would love to see press conferences with some of their colleagues who probably share your concern. Congressman, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Want even more Fox News on YouTube? Become a Fox News Patriot. Click join.
All righty. Well, who knows what's going on with the scientists. It sounds like they're scared and they're leaving, and maybe they're hiding out. Some of them have been killed already. Question is the threatening agent a foreign country or not? I don't know. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. You can get it in veggie cap form or in the powdered form. And with a good probiotic, what you're going to do is you're improving your gut biome. You're improving your immune system at your gut level. You're reducing leaky gut syndrome. You're reducing the chances of getting allergies. You're going to be able to improve your brain function. You're going to be sleeping better. You're going to have better memory. You're going to have less brain fog. You're going to be able to concentrate by getting better sleep. You're consolidating memory. You're also going to have better cellular metabolism. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get either the veggie cap version or the powdered version. Take it every day. And another benefit is that you'll have better skin. Now, Myotrol will help to build muscle and maintain muscle. This is great if you're male or female, 40 years of age or older. Do some resistance training. Take the Myotrol. This is polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle. This is super important to prevent atrophy. If you're an athlete, younger or older, you'll also benefit from Myotrol to help build strength for your sport. Now, Myotrol will also help with the health of your mitochondria, so you'll have more energy to maintain the muscle. Now, with better muscle, you'll also help with brain function. And a lot of people don't understand this, but with better muscle, you'll create these myokines and higher concentrations of BDNF that will lead to neuroprotection and help with neurofunction. So having better musculature will actually help with brain function. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And olive leaf extract, dual purpose. It's going to help to bring down inflammation and help to control your lipid profile. So you're going to help with your immune system and your cardiovascular system. Super important to take every day. And if you have pain because of tension headaches, arthritis, muscle pain, arthritic pain, use this great new product that I have on my store, Super Strong Relief. This will reduce the pain or eliminate the pain within 90 seconds. Now, apply it topically to the area of concern, and you're going to be able to get some relief. You can stack that really well with the collagen as you're rebuilding your joints, and you're reducing the pain in the process. All right, let's continue on with the news. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right. Eight countries that could swing the global balance of power. This is DW. Let's listen in to the powers of
If you
Eurasia.
haven't noticed, the world is changing with a lot of talk about the decline of America.
Let's replay that.
If you haven't noticed, the world is changing with a lot of talk about the decline of America. Its lost status as a superpower, the rise of China, and the emergence of what many experts call multilateralism, where no one country has the most power and where many middle powers try to pursue good relationships with as many countries as possible while hedging against the biggest states. Pakistan is a great example, the way it stepped up to try to broker an Iran war ceasefire. Why would it do that?
Pakistan, I think the fact that they're trying to mediate peace kind of reflects what China wants. China really doesn't like the continuation of the operations at the high oil prices. And China is definitely not stopping Pakistan from mediating between the two sides. So I think it kind of fits both the American interest and the Chinese interest, which I think is very interesting. I think it really shows the swing state nature of Pakistan.
That's Ken Moriyasu, senior fellow at the think tank the Hudson Institute, and until recently a top international correspondent at Nikkei Asia. And if you caught what he just said, he called Pakistan a swing state. But he's not talking about the U.S. elections, which is probably where you've heard the term, about the states that sometimes vote for Republicans and sometimes for Democrats. He's describing a special group of middle powers in Eurasia. Ken's swing states are Armenia, Azerbaijan, Hungary, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Pakistan, Turkey, and Uzbekistan. All right. How did you do in geography class as a kid? Because buckle up, you are going to be seeing a lot more maps. Ken explains that we tend to think about great power competition taking place, for example, in the Indo-Pacific, and we forget about the same dynamic happening on land.
My whole thesis about moving away from the Indo-Pacific is that China, for 15 years, has been trying to avoid dependence on the Indian Ocean, because the Indian Ocean is full of maritime choke points, like the Strait of Hormuz that we're witnessing, right? They are trying to avoid the maritime choke points. But my theory is that if the US wants to counter China, it has to move to the Eurasian continent and move to the land choke points, such as Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijan and also Armenia. Both are on Ken's swing states list, and they recently signed a peace agreement brokered by the United States. It's one of the few foreign policy wins analysts, even though
This video is extremely interesting because it's playing right into modern politics and geopolitics. All right. So there's a book that I'm reading called The New Map by Daniel Yergin. I have about less than 200 pages left. It's about 430 page book. And the section that I'm in right now is the Middle Eastern section of the book. I've read the Russian section and the Chinese section, the US section. All right. So it is true that that China is very concerned about their ability to import energy. Domestically, China uses coal. The majority of their total energy consumption is through coal. It's about 60% or so. The rest of it is oil and gas and some renewables, right? And nuclear. But most of it is coal, domestic coal. Now, almost the majority, I wouldn't say all, but the majority of the natural gas and the oil is coming from other countries. Some of it's coming from Russia through two methods: the Northern Passage through the Arctic, and the pipelines that are in the north between Russia and China. Now, the bigger concern that China has is this whole idea of the 9-dash line, all right? And that encompasses Taiwan, the Philippines, also Vietnam, right? So this whole region for the 9-dash line is very important for navigation for China and also mineral rights, because there's oil and gas in that region that hasn't been fully developed, but has been discovered. Now, there's contention in terms of economic zones on who owns that, especially with Vietnam and the Philippines and Malaysia. All right, now with the choke points that China's concerned about outside of the 9-dash line area is potentially the Taiwan Strait that the United States could choke point, right? But they're really super concerned with the Strait of Malacca. So this is part of the reason why the United States hegemonic power is so important to check China. Now, because the oil is mostly coming from the Middle East for China and natural gas, the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb choke point, those are super important for China, in addition to the Strait of Malacca, in terms of oil coming from the Middle East. Now, think about this for a second. Iran obviously can flex its muscles and shut down the strait. We've seen that recently. But Yemen, which is in the southern area of the Saudi Arabia Peninsula, they can cause a choke point on the Bab el-Mandeb. So Shia influence can choke point if they want to go against Saudi Arabia or U.S. interests. All right. Now, energy is also being exported out of this region for Europe. All right. So there's this. So if the United States can come in and actually chokehold the Strait of Hormuz and control the Bab el-Mandeb area and the Strait of Malacca, then China has a very hard time being able to procure the energy it needs. Now, they do have pipelines through Russia, a little bit of pipelines through Eurasia, but this is the bulk of it is from this shipping lane issue. All right, so you have Iran influencing the region and also influencing Yemen. Now, there's also energy that's being developed and being sold now that's off of the coast of Israel, and parts of it is off the coast of the Gaza Strip. And that is natural gas and some oil, mostly natural gas. Now, Israel's thinking about building a pipeline to Cyprus to feed natural gas to Europe. Now, there's also been some discussion that Israel wants to do an LNG terminal. But my understanding is they don't have that in development yet. And what they're doing is that they're piping natural gas to Egypt, and Egypt is doing the LNG shipping to Europe. Okay, now, so this is part of the reason why the United States is going after Iran, to be able to have more hegemonic power in this region. And by knocking out Iran, it is more about controlling the potential flows of energy to China if they decide to try to take over Taiwan. There is more reason to go to Iran from the United States perspective. One, to make sure they don't have nuclear weapons, and two, to be able to exercise our hegemonic power over China. Not so much about Israel. And this is where the America First pacifists keep on getting it wrong. They keep on saying it's an Israeli war. This is a war for Israel. No, it's not. It's not. We're already in World War III, and we're moving our pieces in place in this grand chessboard to be able to circumvent China if we have to. We don't want to, but if we have to. Okay, so now let's continue on with the video.
Avoid the maritime choke points. But my theory is that if the US wants to counter China, it has to move to the Eurasian continent and move to the land choke points, such as Azerbaijan.
Right.
Azerbaijan.
Now, this is the key that what he's saying. So we've known for a while that the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb choke points in the Strait of Malacca were important for the United States against China. We've known that for a long time. But what's new here is that if you remember, there was this peace agreement between Kazakhstan peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, right? This is right next to Turkey. Okay, now Turkey sometimes aligns with the Europe, sometimes aligns with the United States, sometimes aligns with Iran. They're kind of a wild card. I think also India at times is a wild card. Now in Pakistan, what you have is Shia and Sunni issues, especially along the border of Afghanistan. And there's contention between Pakistan and India. So you have this conflict here. India and Pakistan are nuclear powers. Israel is suspected to be a nuclear power, but hasn't been confirmed. Now, we have Armenia and Azerbaijan causing, having peace because of Trump. And what that does is that it allows them to be more in our sphere of influence, the United States sphere of influence, and is a southern front on Russia. See, the whole reason why Russia was so aligning with Iran and Syria was that if the United States was able to control Iran, then they could circumvent energy flows and compete with Russia. See, Russia's big money is sending energy, especially natural gas, through Ukraine and into Europe, and also through Nord Stream pipeline to Germany, right? But if you could create a pipeline through Iran, through Iraq, through Syria, or through Jordan and through Israel, or even through Turkey and into Europe, then you're talking about not needing Russian oil. So this is a way for the United States to check Russia by having more of a sphere of influence. This is the reason why Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, this has always been in play between the United States and Russia. And Russia, I would say, during the Cold War was probably winning that sphere of influence. Now, with the breakup of the Soviet Union, and unfortunately the mismanagement of U.S. foreign policy, now we're trying to use these players in the region to help our cause. Now, the Chinese know this, and so they're trying to use Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, right, as a means to be able to get energy, build pipelines and infrastructure. There are some pipelines in this region to help with importing energy into China. China knows that for its economy to grow, it can't sustain itself on just coal. It needs that oil. So let's continue with his thesis here.
Also Armenia. Both are on Ken's swing states list, and they recently signed a peace agreement brokered by the United States. It's one of the few foreign policy wins analysts, even those pretty critical of President Donald Trump, give him credit for.
So Azerbaijan and Armenia have been going at each other for many decades, but they were ready for peace. And then they came to Trump, and Trump proposed creating a land connection between Azerbaijan and its exclave through Armenia. And that's called the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity trip. And that would kind of, the current so-called middle corridor goes through the Central country in China, Central Asia, Caspian Sea, through Azerbaijan to Georgia, and then to Turkey. That's the middle corridor. But this offers another route through the south without going through Georgia, through Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Turkey. So it gives an alternative option to the middle route, which is the whole key of the Eurasian connectivity, is to have multiple options. And we really don't know where Georgia politically is going, so it's always good to have another alternative.
The next swing state is the only one firmly in Europe. That is Hungary. The middle power under Viktor Orban managed good relationships with all three big players, China, Russia, and the United States.
China has been really focusing on Hungary as a gateway to the European Union. It has been investing heavily there. Because Hungary has, because of its political leaders, has had problems having a friendly relationship with the rest of the EU. China's taken advantage of that and offered Orban and his administration lots of investment. But Orban also is very close to the Trump administration. So they're really in the middle of these two sides. I think they're playing it pretty well, trying to extract benefits from both sides. So that's typically a swing state.
We're heading to Central Asia next with Ken's take on Kazakhstan.
Now you can see the battle is happening between the United States and China. You can also see that there is some context where maybe World War III is already started. Maybe then historians are going to say it started in 2022 with the invasion of Ukraine. But perhaps we can say that World War III is like a 30 or 40-year war, where there are these pauses, but then it flares back up. But it's really a gigantic geopolitical play between the United States, Russia, and China. And, in some contexts, there are wars that have lasted for 30 years. The 30-year war, the famous 30-year war in Europe. But the point here is that maybe the 21st century, the beginning of the 21st century, maybe the inflection point being 9/11, was the start of World War III. But it's a different type of war. It's not as immediate destruction in a short amount of time, like, let's say, World War II. It's almost like in between a Cold War and a hot war. It's like a lukewarm war.
Country is massive and smack in the middle of the Eurasian landmass.
Kazakhstan, by its geography, it's right next to China on the west side. It is where the railroad from China to Europe passes through, largely because there are a few mountains. It's a flat land. Kazakhstan is very keen to invest. It has oil, so it's very rich. It has been investing in railways and pipelines. It's a crucial connector state, energy lifeline for China if it wants to move away from the Indian Ocean. But then again, Kazakhstan doesn't want to swap its traditional dependence on Russia with dependence on China. That would suffocate them. They have something called the multi-vector foreign policy. They always like to have options open. So this has created an opening for America to deepen ties.
There are other Central Asian countries that Ken could have added to his swing state list. He picked Uzbekistan.
Uzbekistan is very interesting. It's the only Central Asia country that doesn't have a border with China or Russia, so it has a little more flexibility in foreign policy. The Americans really are trying to strengthen relations with Uzbekistan.
The country sandwiched between Russia and China also makes it onto Ken's list. Mongolia is wooed by both powers, and Ken says its history plays a role in the psyche of Russians and Chinese.
Mongolia, geography, really smack in the middle of Russia and China, and also a great history. The Mongol Empire really is has such an impact on modern day foreign policy. For instance, the Russian invasion of Ukraine it comes from a paranoia on the Russian side of needing to defend its borders, having buffer state. That comes from the memory of the Golden Horde, the Mongolians invading from the east for many years. So that really, I think, still has an impact. Uzbekistan was ruled by one of Genghis Khan's sons. China was under the Mongolian Yuan dynasty. Really, there's much more history to that land.
Last but not least is Turkey. At the crossroads of Europe and Asia, it's a bit of a chameleon, able to play different roles in different regions.
Turkey is the most important of the swing states and the most important for Japan in its deterrence against China. Turkey, due to its geography, is critical, but it also has multiple identities. It's part of the Islamic world, part of the Black Sea economic zone. So with Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, and Georgia, they're one bloc. The Balkan countries and North Africa due to the former Ottoman period. I think for Japan and for the US, the key is Turkey's new interest in the Turkic states. The organization of Turkic states has a much more potential to be a more coherent, stronger unit. And once they become a strong voice, I think they will be a presence on China's western border.
So there you have it, the 8 swing states of Eurasia, playing China, Russia, and the United States against each other. And inversely, Beijing, Moscow, and Washington must vie for their favor. And for now, one country is doing a better job than the other two. Can you guess which?
Xi Jinping has been saying it all along. He wants to create a community of shared destiny or a shared future. And what that means is to build pipelines, build ports, to connect the economic prosperity with China. So if China rises, all these neighboring countries rise with it. And because they'll be so intertwined that when it comes to a vote at the UN or the WTO, these neighboring countries will vote with China.
So what do you think? Do these swing states make sense to you? And do you think it's really China that's coming out ahead? Let us know in the comments. That's all for now. DW News is giving you the latest and all.
So the point that I'm making here is that when we're talking about the war in Iran, when we're talking about what's going on in the Middle East, are we sure that it's just for Israel? Or is there something much bigger, way beyond Israel, that is in play here? And I suspect that it is the latter. The United States is in the Middle East, not because of Israel, but because of checking China and Russia. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the heirloom barley. You can use this to detoxify your body, soak up free radicals, and bring down inflammation. When you take this every day, you're going to slow down the aging process, help with your immune system and your endocrine system. By taking heirloom barley and you work out, you'll recover quicker for your workout. And also, you're helping with your cardiovascular health. You're soaking up free radicals, you're reducing inflammation, you're reducing plaque formation, and you're helping with brain function. Because with less inflammation and less free radicals at the cerebral level, then what's going to happen is that your reducing the chances of having amyloidosis. Please go to my store and get the digestive enzyme complex. This will help with your pancreatic health. It'll break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids and help you to digest your foods. Super important. It also has bromelain in it, which will help to break up clots. Another great product line that I have are the structural nanosilver gels. You can get it in the dispenser, the quick dispenser, or the tube form. All right, either one you use the same way. Now with the structural nanosilver gels, it's dual purpose. You can put it on your skin to help heal your skin, to help to improve the health of your skin. You can use it daily. You can put it on a wound. It'll help to heal the wound quicker. And if you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well because of the cold season, you can put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your eyes, around your ears, on your nose, lightly coat your nostrils. It'll stay active for 5.5 hours. You cannot do that with Perel. Structural nanosilver gel is a very high quality product. Please make sure you have some at home. You never know when you need it. Structural nanosilver toothpaste will help to whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, bring down inflammation at the gum line. It'll help to neutralize. And with taking this toothpaste, which has no fluoride in it, you will improve your oral hygiene and help with your cardiovascular health. A lot of people don't realize that good oral hygiene actually helps with cardiovascular health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. You spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right, we're going to go with our last video here. The BBC.
The war in Iran has pulled in countries across the globe.
This is the BBC dealing with China. China's hidden role in the Iran war.
The war in Iran has pulled in countries across the globe. Today on the Security Brief, we're going to take you inside China's role in this conflict. From spy ships carrying out surveillance to weapons sales and the flow of oil, China is deeply embedded.
I'll show you what and where China has deployed and what exactly is going on in the Indo-Pacific with the US attention elsewhere.
Stay with us. This is the Security Brief. Mikey, what is China's main strategic interest in Iran? What is at stake if the United States were to impose this blockade on the Strait indefinitely?
Yeah, I think the obvious one, Christian, is China is Iran's biggest trading partner. They're the biggest consumer of exported Iranian crude oil, 90% to be precise. But their dependence on Iranian oil isn't as immediate as you might think. The decision by Washington to lift sanctions on Iranian crude already at sea gave China's independent refiners, they call them Chinese teapots, it's given them a supply of oil for around 2.5 months. And we know from tracking data that a Chinese tanker made it out of the Strait just after the blockade was initiated by the US.
Okay, but at some point, you'd imagine maybe 2 months down the line, if this continued, they're going to start to feel the pinch. What might they do about that?
Well, I think the most important data for us to monitor, we're obviously hearing, lots of information coming out of these presses from Hegseth and the Joint Chiefs Dan Kane, but sort of from independent verification, I think what we should be looking for, especially on the Security Brief, is how many Chinese-owned tankers are actually making it out of the Strait. So coming from the Persian Gulf, Karg Island, for example, coming out through the Persian Gulf and through the Strait. And I think those real-time data trackers, such as Kepler that we're looking at, and marine traffic, that'll give you the data points that you can rely on and sort of indicate whether something else is going on, sort of back channeling, for example.
You would presume, wouldn't you, that there is some sort of diplomacy going on in the background, and they've certainly played a role in the peace talks that have started in Pakistan. What about its military support for Iran? What does that look like?
This is the Liuang 1. It's a fascinating vessel. It's a 30,000-ton intelligence gathering vessel that has been operating in international waters near the Gulf of Oman, and we've been tracking this. And this job is basically to monitor and hoover up intelligence on the US military response. So, for example, carrier strike groups, destroyers, fighter aircraft, missile defense systems. Christian, they all leave an electronic footprint, electronic fingerprints, if you like, And that ship will be feeding that electronic data back to Beijing, a comprehensive amount of data on US capability that China hasn't been able to look at before, and giving basically Beijing a real-time picture of the entire battlefield situation. That ship has the ability to look out at 6,000 kilometers.
Which is clearly invaluable in future military planning. But what about their military support for Iran inside the country?
Open source intelligence indicates that if China hasn't sent Iran surface-to-air missile systems already, then they're about to. And what we're talking about here is specifically what are called manpads. Actually, I think we've got a picture of what a manpad looks like. That's actually an FN6. It's the Chinese-made surface-to-air missile system. But as you can see there, really small, really portable, and launched off the shoulder of a soldier. Now, what this does is it has what's called an infrared seeker in the nose. And what it'll do is it'll look basically at the hot part of the target, so usually the engines. Now, with more advanced series, there's also the QW12. What these manpads can do is they can bring down helicopters, drones, cruise missiles, and it's got an inbuilt anti-decoy system. So, for example, when I was flying over Baghdad, we had flares operating on the aircraft. And what the flare does is it takes what effectively the IR seeker is looking at, which is the hot part of the engine, and it puts out an equally hot source, and it gets the missile to distract it. Right. So, but these missiles will have a capability that ignores the flare and goes straight for the.
If you're in the cockpit over Iran, that right now would be your single biggest concern.
Yeah, I mean, these are hard to detect. They're mobile, and they're hard to destroy. With a strong countermeasures capability, they're precisely the kind of threat that would disrupt any US air activity in and around the Strait that is there to support the blockade. So there's additional open source intelligence of the US deploying what are called AC-130 gunships. I think you've heard of these. I mean, I've had first-hand experience working with the AC-130. We can see it here on the screen. What you can see here is it's in a left-hand turn, and all of the ammunition, all of the armament on that aircraft is based down the left-hand side. And what we're talking about are 20-millimeter cannons, 40-millimeter cannons, and believe it or not, a 105-millimeter Mauser cannon. I think there's a couple of those.
Wow.
And it can even fire through cloud using what's known as a synthetic aperture radar. So it's got real sensitive systems on there that allow its use in really inclement weather conditions. But I just want to show the viewers how big a 105-millimeter Hauser is. I think we've got a picture here underslung to a Black Hawk. I mean, if you look at the size of the troops there stood next to that, they can make an impact.
Right, here's the paradox at the heart of all this. Washington goes to war in the Middle East, the very region that in its own national security strategy says should no longer be the priority, while China watches, waits, hoovers up all this information, and quietly extends its reach across the Indo-Pacific region. So is the United States fighting the wrong war in the wrong place at the wrong time?
I mean, I think you could definitely say that. I mean, from our analysis, there's definitely huge detractions of what the US is doing in Iran at the moment. And I think I'd go even far as to say that there might be many in the Pentagon who would privately share, that exact viewpoint. But let's look at the document itself. There's a couple of excerpts that I want to pull out, which I think are basically point to what you're talking about. So concerning Iran, it says there is, quote, less to this problem than headlines might lead one to believe, unquote. So basically, due to the bombing of Iran on Operation Midnight Hammer that we saw back in June 2025, and that was targeting Iran's enrichment nuclear facilities. Now, when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, there's another paragraph in here which I just want to draw the viewers' attention to, which is regarding specifically Taiwan. Here we go, just pulling it up now. It says, quote, deterring a conflict over Taiwan, ideally by preserving military overmatch, is a priority. So it's almost kind of what this war is showing is it's almost contradicting that national security strategy that came out less than a year ago.
Right, a military overmatch is what military parlance for we have the upper hand.
Right.
And that, in your view, has been compromised.
Yeah, I mean, just for example, the...
Well, I'm going to disagree, respectfully. Having control of the Strait by the United States, reducing the Shia influence in the Middle East, eliminating the nuclear capability of Iran, degrading the proxies from Iran like Hezbollah, Hamas and the Houthis is going to strengthen our position against China because of the Strait. In addition, because we're controlling the flow of energy to China. In addition, by having a little bit more of a stabilized region that is aligned with Washington and potentially even aligned with the Saudis, then we're talking about circumventing the hegemonic influence of China in Eurasia. Also, it checks Russia and their influence in Eurasia. So I disagree that taking out Iran is actually part of the game plan to fighting against China.
USS Tripoli, the amphibious ready group, the ARG. I mean, we've been reporting on that for weeks. It's already embarked and set sail from Okinawa in Japan, where it's based. So, you know, the fact that that is already now, and it went via Diego Garcia, that is now within the vicinity of the Gulf of Oman, tells us that capability is being pulled from that region.
Just to be clear for our viewers, what does an amphibious readiness group look like? What does it comprise?
Yeah, I think we've got footage here. This is the USS Tripoli itself. It's known as a Lightning carrier. Lightning basically based on the fact that it carries over 20 F-35B fifth-generation fighters that are called the Lightning aircraft. But in addition to this, it's got 2 amphibious assault ships, and they're carrying a Marine Expeditionary Unit called the MEU, which includes over 2,000 Marines.
What about the carrier groups? Because we know the Abraham Lincoln, the Gerald Ford carrier group, they are tasked in Iran. Do they still have a carrier group that is forward positioned in the Asia Pacific?
Yeah, open source intelligence does indicate that the USS George Washington carrier is still there. That replaced the Ronnie Reagan in 2024. And the George Washington is on permanent deployment, and it's out of Yokosuka in Japan. That's still there, according to OSINT.
Right. So the strategic review that you referred to, it's looking at China's capability, and it points to the Navy particularly, which is rapidly expanding. What does that look like?
Yeah, this is absolutely fascinating when you start digging into this. Let's start by taking a look at Chinese Navy bases down China's eastern seaboard. Basically split into 3 commands: north, east, and southeast sea fleets. In total, around 332 ships. That number could be higher, including 3 aircraft carriers, 60 subs, and 10,000 plus ton destroyers.
Right, and in terms of the major naval bases, what would we be looking at along that coast?
Yeah, let's just keep this graphic up for a second. If we look to the southwest of Taiwan, you can see Taiwan down there in the lower center of the shot. We pulled some fascinating satellite imagery on Google Earth across the Yulin base on the island of Hanin. You can see Yulin down in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen there. Let's just take a zoom in. We've counted on the destroyer side. We've counted 12 Chinese warstrips on these 2 jetties. Let's just go in a little bit closer. And by identifying them, we're looking at basically variants of the PLA's what's called a Type 52 destroyer and Type 56 frigates. So this is the Type 55. This is the latest destroyer that the PLA have. It's 10,000 plus tons, which actually puts it more in the cruiser category. And you know, when you're talking about the identification, you can see the heli landing pad on the back. Heli landing pads are employed basically for anti-submarine warfare, so they'll be called pingers. They'll put sonar in the water. They'll listen out for that. You can see the gun on the front. That has a certain shape to it, and then there's a lot of systems in between the gun and the back.
That middle bullet point which says hypersonic missiles.
Right. So they can deploy, and as of December 2025, there were images appearing online about the YJ-21 hypersonic missile. This is really important. We've spoken about hypersonics a lot on this. The sort of definition of a hypersonic missile is Mach 5 plus, which is 5 times the speed of sound. But the YJ-21, it's thought it can travel at Mach 6 in the cruise phase and then Mach 10 in the terminal phase. The terminal phase is basically it's gone up, it's cruising at Mach 6, gets its target, and then when it's coming inbound to the target, it'll accelerate to maximum velocity, which makes it
Mach 10.
But yeah, which makes it really hard to track and destroy.
Can we go back to the submarines for a second? What have you picked up on that?
Yeah, let's if we can just go back to the regional map, which shows. Yeah, there we go. There are 2 critical submarine facilities. One's at Qingdao, which you can see right in the north there. It's almost the beam, South Korea. And the other one's at Hanan. If we zoom back in on the satellite image, you'll see submarines in dock at the Yulin base. Now, we've just been looking at the Yulin base. This is where the destroyers are. Then as the map comes out, you can see just down to the right of that, you can see 6 jetties. And if we go in even closer, there are 3 types of what are called Type 94. They're SSBN submarines. SSBN stands for Subsurface Ballistic Nuclear, that form part of China's second strike sea-based nuclear deterrent. And you can identify them. You see that little sort of rectangular hump on the back there. Mm-hmm. That's basically where the ballistic missiles go in, and they go in vertically.
And you found us something that looks like a scene from a James Bond movie, just to the south of these jetties.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It's fascinating. It was actually our producer Sam that cottoned onto this. It was a brilliant spot. This is a Planet Labs satellite image from August 2020. And I just want you to note how many jetties there are there at the moment. But if you look, four jetties, yeah. Sticking out. Hold that thought, note that. What this shows is you can see here what's called a Type 93. So this isn't the SSBN. The Type 93 is the attack submarines. Right. So it goes after shipping on the surface and other submarines. But that basically is at the entrance to a concealed area. You know, what this tells you is obviously, you know, why do they use these concealed bases? Well, if we're talking about the second strike nuclear deterrent, it might be for protection, but also it's certainly concealing whatever's going on, whatever's going into that submarine from foreign intelligence.
Yeah. And if we spin that forward and look at this image, now there are 6 jetties and you get a closer look at the underground base.
Right. So 50% additional capability on jetties, which shows you that, again, China is rapidly expanding its submarine capability, but also it's giving its submarine capability underground bases like this in order to conceal what they're either doing or testing or protecting.
So it shows how far they're advancing. But that, I mean, I'm presuming there is still a fairly sizable imbalance, an overmatch, as the Americans refer to it, between the US and China when it comes to the carriers and the carrier strike groups.
Yeah, and it's significant. The US have 11 active carriers. They've got 10 nuclear-powered Nimitz class and 1 Gerald Ford class, which we've spoken about a lot on Security Brief. The Nimitz displaces around 100,000 tons of volume water and can operate around 75 aircraft.
And it never has to refuel. It's like a traveling airbase.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And what about the People's Liberation Army?
The PLA have, up till now, operated 2 older carriers called the Liaoning and Shandong. I think we can take a look at that. Interestingly, the Liaoning originally started as an unfinished Soviet-era carrier from Ukraine that China bought in the late 90s. It operates what's called a STOBAR system. That basically means, the STOBIT means short takeoff and arrested recovery. So it will get airborne. See that big ramp on the front? Yeah. Those 2. So the aircraft, the J-15T, will get airborne off that, and then it will land using the wire. You know, like you've seen on Top Gun, they put the hook down and they'll trap it. So that's basically, the Liaoning basically was bought partially built from Soviet-era Ukraine. The Shandong was then completely built in China.
And what aircraft would they operate off that kind of carrier?
Yeah, I think that's when you look at the type of naval aviation and diversity on the Nimitz, I think that's a good question, because it's literally just 1 aircraft. It's called the J-15T fighter. And this is the only one. There we go. That's a shot of it there. And this is the only fighter that up until now, the Chinese have been able to operate off those 2 carriers. And when you contrast that, as I say, with the variety of capability the USS Nimitz or the Ford-class carriers have, there really is no comparison.
Well, they are trying to bridge that gap.
Right, they are. And I think this is a good point of discussion. This is where it gets really interesting. So I want to show you some of the similarities in the way that capability is expanding. I think we've got a 2-shot here, a comparison. There we go. On the left, you've got the USS Nimitz. That's been operating for decades. This is the Fujian, which is basically China's latest aircraft carrier. It's currently in trials, and it's home of this newest and largest aircraft carrier that China has.
And how does that one on the right, the Fujian, compare to the Nimitz?
Right. I mean, different in many, many ways. You're looking at 100,000 tons for the Nimitz. You're looking at 80,000 tons for the Fujian. The Nimitz can operate 70-plus aircraft. Fujian probably about 40 to 60. It's steam catapults on the Nimitz, more advanced. It's called EMALS, so electromagnetic air launch system on the Fujian. And again, as you pointed to earlier, the Nimitz is nuclear powered. The US have been operating carriers for over 100 years, Christian, 100 years. The Chinese have been operating carriers for 14 years. And so there is a huge amount to be able to catch up on in that time. And obviously China they will build exactly what they have the know-how to build, which isn't going to be everything that the US knows, given the US experience. So,
but as we know, the Chinese are very good at copying intellectual property.
Yeah, they are. And you know, when it comes to developing that additional capability, there's some really interesting capability comparisons. So if we look at the screen, we can see that this is the E2 Hawkeye. That's been operating under an airborne early warning capability off the Nimitz carriers for decades. You can see that big radar on the back. Now, when you look at the aircraft on the left, the KJ600, you know, there would definitely be beers on, you know, if you could point out the differences to that, because I'm struggling at the moment, even with my aircraft recognition knowledge. Let's go on to the F-35. So on the left, you've got the J-35. On the right, you've got the F-35. Wow. That's obviously US made, the UK operated the F-35B. Again, striking similarity. Then we can look at, you spoke about the J-15T. That's been operating off the carriers for a while, but the J-15T, when you look at a cross comparison to the Russian Su-35, again, it's really hard, even with my experience, to try and distinguish what the actual difference is.
I mean, aesthetically they look the same, but I'm presuming the hardware, the software inside is different.
Yeah, and that's a really important point to make as well, is that the software and hardware will be different. The weapon systems are likely to be very different. So what you see on the outside, albeit similar, doesn't necessarily translate into what you see on the inside.
Right. So new capability, really important things that we've been able to show the viewer, but still the comparison, the Chinese are years, if not decades behind the United States when it comes to naval air power.
Yeah, and you know, we talk about how quickly Chinese naval power is expanding rapidly, and it is. But when it comes to the carriers, you know, it's a really important point to make that, you know, the US have been doing this for 100 years. They've got all-weather, day-night capability, deck operations, and that's a really dangerous business. And a lot of lessons have been learned just through trial and error and operating that. So while the PLA do have a new carrier, making it 3, and they have more aviation to be able to fly off it, again, the US have been doing this a long time, and there are a lot of lessons that the Chinese will need to learn before they, which I say will get anywhere close, but I don't think they will.
All right. United States then holding the upper hand for now, but China, the silent bystander.
When it comes to carriers.
When it comes to carriers.
Yeah.
But China, as I say, the silent bystander in this conflict, and yet maybe they are the biggest strategic winner of all in the conflict. Mikey, thank you very much for that. It's
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver drops and lozenges. You can get it in cherry flavor, in honey and lemon. And also the drops you can get in Manuka honey, in orange splash. The structural nanosilver drops and lozenges will help to neutralize, help to improve your oral cavity, and they're perfect for the allergy season and the cold season. The moment you have that throat irritation, take them right away. Super important. And if you're cleaning around the house or you're working outside, take them to mitigate any problems that you may have from allergies. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the structural nanosilver lozenges and drops. I also have Cleanse, which is 30 parts per million, and Max 35, which is 35 parts per million. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, either one of them, swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and then swallow it. What this will do is neutralize, improve your oral cavity and your oral pharynx, maintain your mucosal barrier, and help the health of your epithelial cells. Super important, because what it will do is boost up your immune system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Max 35 or Cleanse. Take it every day. I've been doing this protocol every day for over 6 years. So that's the end of my broadcast for today. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work that I do by purchasing the great products that I offer. And hopefully you've learned that this conflict in the Middle East is not just about Iran. This is about a larger strategic positioning for the United States against China. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.